I agree with V and the Dalai Lama that if I was going to be reincarnated, I also would want to come back as a hot woman. Someone mentioned ComicsGate, and they jokingly referred to the Wikipedia, and I didn't know what they were talking about. I didn't realize it was in here. And then someone recommended, ComicsGate has Wikipedia, but it's pretty biased. And there's also something called Galactic, and I looked that up, and that took me down a rabbit hole that I will explore a little bit later. It's very, very funny. I found the master troll on Info. If you Google ComicsGate and Galactic, you can start reading the entries. It involves Vox Day, and it's very, very funny. The guy is a master level troll. Anyway, let's take a look at this ComicsGate. ComicsGate on Wikipedia. It's a campaign in opposition to perceived forced diversity and progressivism in the content of North American superhero comic books and the kind of creators who work in the industry. Okay, this is almost sounds like the in a scientific paper, when you write a paper, there's usually an abstract before you get into the body of the work. And sometimes there used to be something called I hope I don't script the pronunciation of this, a précis, which is like one or two lines. That is the summation of, it's this tightest summation you could possibly get. So there's like the précis, the abstract, and then the body of the work. So this starts off, it sounds like almost like a scientific paper. And then it just, I love reading stuff like this. I love reading heavy biased stuff, because I love reading propaganda, because it's so cringy to see people write propaganda, because there's no way to disguise propaganda. The only way to disguise propaganda is you have to be a top level troll. And it's really difficult to do, because it's just difficult to do, because the people, your audience isn't dumb. The thing is, even dumb people know that when you pee on their leg, they know it's not rain, no matter how often you tell them it's rain. Anyway, the name is derived from Gamergate, a similar movement related to video games. Press F to doubt. Is ComicsGate similar to Gamergate? If I remember, I guess I could check out Gamergate to see what the abstract on that is. I believe Gamergate involved journalists who were having sex with the girls who were making video games, something like that. I think Zoe Quinn was involved. It was something weird like that. So I'm not sure anyone in ComicsGate was having sex with journalists, but I digress. Participants argue that forced diversity occurs in both hiring and comics content, and this has led to a decline in sales. Okay, so he's got references here, but when I checked God darn you, when I checked one of the other references, it didn't work. It referred back to itself. I think I checked number 9, and it went right back to itself. Led to a decline in sales. Okay, the movement has been described as part of the alt-right movement. Sweet Jesus. Okay, alt-rightism is, I believe it's a term coined by Richard Spencer, and it is, I believe, the advocacy of an ethno-state in America, which America was never an ethno-state. I mean, it was predominantly English at one time, but it will never be an ethno-state. It will never be an English state. It will never be, I don't know what he's talking about. That was something that will never happen in America. It doesn't even make sense. But you're calling people, let's call them socialists of the 1930s Germany. It's the highest defamation in America right now. To call someone a socialist, a German socialist, is the most defamatory thing you can say. It's the penultimate defamatory statement. The ultimate would be call someone a abuser of children, a P to the E to the D to the O. So this is, and it's interesting because defamation deals with who the person who said it, who the plaintiff is, and who the defendant is. And the defendant is part of a small group, a medium-sized group, a large group. Is it an anonymous group? Is it a small group where the members are known? It might be more defamatory than if it's a medium-sized group where the members are semi-public figures or public figures. Or the whole law of tort law of defamation is very interesting. But this is a just disgusting thing to say. If you call someone alt-right, be prepared to prove it, because it's horrible. And as a harassment campaign, that may be more on the mark. if you consider harassment people who don't like being called Nazis and who object to being called alt-right white supremacists. How dare they? How dare they defend themselves? Which targets women, people of color. Well, I think all human beings are people of color, and LGBT folk in the comic book industry. Well, there are colored women and LGBT people in ComicsGate. ComicsGate, the people, I'm defining ComicsGate as independent comics. That's kind of the independent comics. Yeah, I mean, that's if you had to put ComicsGate in one line, it would be independent comics. And I will always support independent business people. Who wouldn't? Why wouldn't you support the little guy over the giant Marvel and DC and Image and Dark Horse and all those others? Why wouldn't you support the little guy? And all these people, these color targets, these color women and the gays, they're all in ComicsGate. We're all here. It has faced blame for the vandalism of a store that did not stock comics created by its members and for threats of violence against others. Its use of the hashtag dates back to at least 2014. Okay, well, I guess this is put in anonymously. You don't have to say who you are. That's fine. But who controls Wiki? Can anyone correct it? Somehow I kind of doubt, because it would just go back and forth between Renfamous and her minions would probably be coming in here and, saying the most abhorrent things. Members of the movement object to things they feel exemplify problems in the comics industry, which interferes with entertaining its traditional readers. Okay, that's a loaded statement. You don't have readers anymore. In the 80s and 90s, you had readers. The comic sales, I think, is a downward slope since the peak of the 90s. Admittedly, the 90s were kind of an overblown example, but comic books are not selling. Examples include storylines in which the white male characters that have traditionally had the superhero identities of Wolverine, Thor, Hulk, Captain America, and Spider-Man have been temporarily replaced by female and or racial minority characters. European people are the minority. They are the global minority. Who's the most populous people would be probably the Chinese in number one spot and the Indians in the number two spot. So Europeans are an absolute minority, globally speaking. Temporarily replaced. Good God. Stories dealing with current social issues and the depiction of women with less idealized figures. Oh, God. What is it? Oh, this link works. Comedian Jim Jeffries confronts diversity in comics creator over offensive remarks. Polygon archived. So that citation doesn't really match what you were talking about, so I don't quite understand. They argue that a shift of focus away, catering exclusively to traditional readers, you mean the people who spend money, in order to win the favor of new comic readers. You don't have new comic readers. The industry is dying. And hiring more diverse talent. That's another loaded sentence. How about hire people based on merit? Have led to declining sales. Well, have the sales declined? If the sales are declining, why don't you just say that? You don't need to put all these citations. Professionals in the movement complain of discrimination against them for their socio-political views. Van Sciver, who worked consistently for DC 2004-18, described the left-wing dominance in the comic book industry. If you want to see this for yourself, just go on Twitter and follow the top 50 people at Marvel and DC. They are insane left-wing liberals. No, I shouldn't say they're not liberals. They are insane left-wing communists and socialists. Which has led to oppressive social justice warrior harassment and blacklisting and call for escapist, apolitical entertainment. Industry veteran Chuck Dixon and Smith, both politically conservative, alleged in 2016 that in the industry's pursuit of a more diverse marketplace, they've been blacklisted. DC published a 12-issue miniseries written by Dixon the following year. Artist Tim Lim said in 2017 he'd been blacklisted after a new publisher chose not to use covers that Lim was working on for them because the political context of the work he had done for Vox Day and Dixon's alt hero was too controversial. Comic artist Van Sciver presents ComicsGate as a consumer-led revolt against what is clearly a left-wing dominance in the comic book industry and a response to a culture war. All right. Consumer-led revolt against left-wing. Yeah, okay. And independent comics. Fair enough. That's a good definition. Artist Mike Miller, who is one of the best artists, I think, in ComicsGate, and a very, very funny guy, at least on Twitter, though he is, his YouTube channel is, I think I've talked myself into a corner here. His YouTube channel is not as interesting as his Twitter account is. Sorry, Mike. Describes it as an alliance of comic book fans, critics, and creators who have found common cause in standing up against what they see as a hard push by social justice warriors into their hobby. Okay, fair enough. Activities, redemption. Related articles, Mark Waid, Ethan Van Sciver, and Cyberfrog. Mark Waid. Oh my dear, do I want to click on that? Let's finish this out here. Participants say it had no organization or leadership. Who? I think Cecil is the leader of ComicsGate. He is, the time is now, and he is the hero we deserve. Commentator Myers posted on the banner Diversity in Comics, who's now changed his name to Comics Matter, I think. Comics Matter with your boy Zach, to say nothing of the dog, by Jerome K. Jerome. And former DC illustrator Van Sciver has been prominent advocates for the campaign. Social media. Female superhero Mockingbird was depicted on a comic book cover wearing a t-shirt that read, "Ask me about my feminist agenda." This was followed by harassment, press F to doubt, on Twitter of series writer Chelsea Kane, including a posted illustration of Mockingbird after being brutally killed with her costume torn off with the t-shirt phrase as a caption. If you go on Indiegogo or Indiecron and you look up Brand by, what's the guy's name? Antonio, I don't know his last name, and Kane White. They are a writer and artist team up, and Kane White did a drawing of this kind of Santa Claus monster, and it has a t-shirt. It's something like, "Ask me about my feminist agenda" or something. It's very, very funny. So she claims she was harassed. Chelsea Kane claims she was harassed. Well, Chelsea Kane is an interesting character. But if you're talking about harassment, it's very, very lightweight people joking about how she's cancer and the book is stupid. She rage quit Twitter a few weeks ago after her Man-Eaters book received some criticism from SJWs because it's a book about girls who get their period and a kind of a coming-of-age story, and she didn't include boys who think they're girls, because boys have penises, and if you bleed from your penis, you're in deep, deep trouble. Including a posted illustration of Mockingbird after being brutally killed with her costume torn off with the t-shirt phrase as a caption. Please show this. No, you don't show it. You just have the citation. Alt-right fanboys go after women in the world of comics. Again, they're not, people in ComicsGate are not alt-right, and they're not all boys. So there's probably more men than women, but calling people alt-right, you're just weakening the term. Every time you call somebody say German socialist, you definitely weaken the term. It's like calling people racist. Well, every time you call someone racist, nobody believes people are actually racist anymore. So why don't you show the photograph of that sounds like it's hysterical. It's a comic book character. Killing a comic book character is a joke. Conservative magazine, The Federalist, tracked the Twitter accounts of all 30 freelance writers who had a comic released by Marvel that month, reporting each had criticized President Trump at least once, and none mentioned him positively, of course. It attempted to identify the writers' religions, publishing a report that they included atheists, Jews, and a Muslim. Why don't you capitalize atheists? No respect for the atheists. But that none had spoken on Twitter about being a Christian. Yes, Muslim? Yeah, there are a few Muslims. I don't know if they're practicing. Oh, yes. What's that woman's name? Oh, G. Willow Wilson is one of those American convert Muslims. It's just the funniest thing in the world where just 40-year-old women convert to Islam. Dear God. That's, have you read the Quran? Because it's not good. Remember the rule of thumb? You can beat your wife with a cane no thicker than your thumb. Why on God's green earth would you convert to Islam in a first world nation? Oh, you convert to Islam in a first world nation because there's no repercussions. It's totally safe. You're not in the Middle East hellhole where your husband will actually beat you, probably to death. or in, I don't know, Pakistan, Afghanistan, if you dress inappropriately, there's a very good chance they will kill you in the streets. Or at least publicly cane you, but probably stone you to death. Because that's actually in the Quran. Stoning people to death. So, yeah, there's probably no Christians working at Marvel. Social media post by Marvel Comics assistant Heather Antos. Sweet dear Lord. Featuring several young female co-workers. Why not show the photograph? Getting milkshakes in memory of company veteran Steinberg drew attention from members of the movement. Antos was described by them as a diversity hire. Sort of strawberry blonde, but she's a female. That vagina will take you places at Marvel. An unqualified bimbo. I don't know the definition of bimbo, but unqualified. Yeah, she missed some I think she missed some editing things where there were misspellings and grammatical errors and kind of unusual sentence structure and things like that. So yeah, if you're an editor, you have to be a master of the English language. I mean, you cannot make a mistake. I mean, if you're an editor, you have to be at a level, next level. Like a lot of people think they're good at grammar, and a lot of people are, but to be an editor is something else entirely. Was she unqualified to be an editor? If she made mistakes that people caught, then yes, that makes her unqualified. And the false rape charge type, and the group in general is fake geek girls, Tumblr virtue signalers, and the creepiest collection of stereotypical SJWs anyone could possibly imagine. All true. Antos reported receiving rape threats, being doxxed, and with her... Okay, wait, Zach. If you receive threats of let's call it a sexual battery, that's the easiest thing in the world to provide proof of. You just screen cap it. You screen cap it, you send it to Twitter, and then you send it to the FBI, and then you call the FBI. If you're not showing these threats, I don't believe they happened. The burden of proof is on you. Being doxxed, well, no one should dox anyone, but it's something that Renfamous did. Renfamous doxed one of a woman who donated to your boy Zach's GoFundMe, which is still live. You can donate to. Renfamous doxed a woman because she's an evil, that was an evil, vindictive act. And with her friends, being the target of a campaign of online harassment for some time afterwards. Citations. I don't think those citations are going to show much. Van Sciver has made ComicsGate and related topics a regular feature of his Comic Artist Pro Secrets YouTube channel. Citation needed. Why don't you just provide the hypertext? If you don't know who Ethan Van Sciver is, you can check out Comic Artist Pro Secrets on YouTube. He's very, very entertaining. And he's also an excellent storyteller, as well as a pretty good artist. Meyer has made the campaign a common subject on his YouTube channel, Meyer, and Twitter account, which he identifies comics professionals. He doesn't have a Twitter account anymore. He IDs comic professionals whose work or personal activities he sees as detrimental to the industry. Fair enough. He took credit for the firing of Aubrey Sitterson from the IDW comic G.I. Joe Scarlet Strike Force. Let me interject here. If you want to know why Aubrey Sitterson was fired for his 911 comments, as I mentioned in earlier videos, but to be fair, Scarlet Strike Force probably has not sold many issues. You can find it online, or you can find it somewhere. It's not very good. He wrote the one good book I read that he wrote was the G.I. Joe versus Street Fighter. It was a 6-issue series. It was actually pretty interesting. It was kind of a Fight Club thing. After Citizen criticized on social media what he saw as performative grief about the September 11th attacks. In a 2017 video titled The Dark Roast, Meyer referred to a female Marvel Comics editor as a cum dumpster. Accused various female professionals of sucking their way into the industry. Okay, well, The Dark Roast kind of makes it sound like a roast, which if you follow stand-up comedy, or roast is deeply involved in blue humor. And they used to be private. They were where comedians would celebrate the birthdays, or not the birthdays. They would roast other comedians, maybe as a retirement gift kind of thing. And it was very, very blue. And then that was kind of the joke that they tried to make it as blue as possible. Though, humor in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and earlier times doesn't come close to what it is now. But the thing is, these roasts, like the roast of Pamela Anderson, the roast of Hugh Hefner, modern day roasts are not funny because they're publicized. And there are things that you cannot say on TV, even among comedians, that comedians will say in private. So they're not funny because they have to be politically correct. You cannot roast someone, though the William Shatner roast was pretty funny, because he had a reputation for being kind of a difficult guy to work with. But you have to be politically correct on Comedy Central or whoever shows these roasts. There's some things they couldn't say. One comedian got up there, I remember, and she started saying all this kind of racial humor, and people in the audience were looking at her like, oh, they couldn't believe she was saying this. They were a little set back, but they weren't familiar with what a roast is. A roast is nothing's off limits. It's just full bore, just foot to the. You try to burn the place down, and it's going to include racial humor, sexual humor. You say the most horrible things you can as long as it's funny. Anyway, Scarlet Strike Force did not sell well. He said some horrible things about September 11th. There were, I think, people in the who owned comic book shops who effectively said that Aubrey Citizen was dead to them. They would never carry anything he wrote. And after what he said about September 11th, I totally agree with them. Though, I mean, eventually, if he apologized sincerely for his comments, then you got to forgive him and move on. But I don't believe he has apologized for his comments. Okay, so the dark roast, that's my point. The dark roast is supposed to be very, very blue humor. So calling someone a cum dumpster, it's a joke. Sucking their way into the industry, come on, that's a joke. Obviously a joke, and it's a false equivalence to say that someone is a cum dumpster for sucking their way into the industry. Well, Meyer's a Nazi. Well, that's a false equivalent, because calling someone a socialist doesn't wash off. That's evil in and of itself. Say someone is a dumb whore, that washes off. You know that the person is not actually a dumb whore. Calling someone an alt-right means they're a ethno-nationalist or supremacist or something like that. That kind of stuff will follow you the rest of your life. You will not get many jobs because of it. You won't be able to rent an apartment because of it. So these things are false equivalences. Meyer participated in the backlash against character design Netflix adaptation. Oh, who cares about She-Ra? Oh, God. He called the showrunner a boyish lesbian. Okay, nobody cares about She-Ra. Boyish lesbian. And accused her of reimagining the title character as herself, describing it as utter selfishness and egotism. Members of ComicsGate have responded to professionals criticizing the movement by circulating lists of such creators to boycott. I believe Yellow Flash did that like a year ago or 2 years ago. It's how I first heard of him. And the boycott thing, they kind of canceled it and said, you know what, let's stop with the boycott and we'll make it a boycott. Just support the people we want to support. We don't have to create that blacklist. That blacklist is something that left-wing people do. The Profit Press, SJW Vipers, and other derogatory labels. Oh my. Among those placed on such a list and criticized for the views have been Larry Hama, Mark Waid. Well, Mark Waid is a colossal douchebag and an evil, evil person. Alex DeCampi, Kelly Sue DeConnick, she's a far-left sexist idiot. Matt Fraction, and Ta-Nehisi Coates. I think he is... colorist Moose Bauman recounted that he received threats of violence after stepping away from Van Sciver's creator-owned book Cyberfrog. If you receive threats of violence, show us the screen caps or the phone recordings or whatever, and then call the FBI. If you don't have evidence, in this day and age, there's no excuse for not having evidence. Everything you can screen cap or screen record, everything. If you receive threats of violence, I think you would produce them. A few creators involved with ComicsGate have run successful crowdfunding campaigns promoted to produce comics reflecting the group's values, including Cyberfrog, No Enemy But Peace. What the fudge are you talking about? No enemy but peace? You're so chicken that you won't talk about Jawbreakers and Iron Sights? That's how chicken shit you are? Because you don't want to give them any publicity whatsoever? Jawbreakers, I think it raised like $400,000. Ironsides was like another $100,000, maybe more, because I think he opened the campaigns with different covers or something. So those two books, one was Ironsides was black and white, and raised like over $100,000. Red Rooster by the Bright Wiser team, Mitch and his wife, I don't know her name, and Mike Miller's Lone Star, alt-right activist, Vox Day. Again, if you call Vox Day alt-right, you've got to provide evidence of it. That's effectively calling him a socialist. Published the series Alt Hero, never read it, and hired Chuck Dixon to write for him. Chuck Dixon's a very funny guy. In September, he announced publishing in print ComicsGate Comics, but canceled it following complaints from a faction led by Van Sciver. He did not represent the movement and moved planned titles to his existing imprints. Yeah, that was kind of cringy. Jawbreakers. So now you do talk about Jawbreakers. Meyer announced his crowdfunded comic book Jawbreakers Lost Souls, collaboration with John Malin, who's also an excellent artist, will be published in Anarchic Press. Twitter screenshot private conversations between comic retailers discussing whether or not they would order copies of the series. He encouraged his followers to publicly post and circulate names, locations, and employee information of stores. So, posting a store's location. He accused an Alberta Canadian store of bullying and intimidating their own customers after the female co-owner tweeted they would not stock the publication. The store was subsequently vandalized and robbed. Yeah, it had the window was broken so a junkie could break in and steal from... This is a comic book store, so it's a collectible store, right? A junkie broke the glass, broke in, and stole from the till. Took the money that was left in the till or whatever safe was unlocked. The junkie took the money. If it was a comic book fan, like you're trying to imply that it was a fan of Meyer, they would steal the comic books, you idiot, because if they're old issues or issues on display, they're more valuable than anything you could possibly have in the till. What is it? A till doesn't contain more than a few $100s, if that, in small bills. The comic books, if you have them and you didn't lock them up, some of them are worth thousands of dollars. A fan of comic books would go there and take the stuff you have on display. So this is, to even include this is really, really stupid. An Irish store received threats of violence on social media. Please produce evidence. Antarctic Press announced they were ending their relationship with Meyer. Oh, God. I haven't read this yet. This is all new to me. So how do you think they're going to cover this Mark Waid issue? Let's read on. Citing shock over his behavior. Wait, what? Citing shock over his... No. When they announced on Facebook that they were ending their contractual relationship, I don't think they talked something about forces that were... it was a really weird post where it kind of made an allusion to outside forces, i.e. Mark Waid. I don't think they referenced shock over his behavior. Meyer blamed freelance writer. Okay, even the sentence structure, including freelance writer Mark Waid, is trying to say, oh, hey, Mark Waid doesn't work for Disney or DC, Disney, Marvel or DC. He's a freelance writer, so you can't fire him. You see what they did here? This is chicken. For contacting Antarctic store to talk about the controversy, accusing him of pressuring Antarctic not to publish the book. But are you going to mention that Mark Waid in his Facebook and his Twitter mentioned that he had a call in to Antarctic Press? It's a area of tort law called interference with advantageous business relationships, and by different jurisdictions call that tortious interference or tortious interference. So this interference with advantageous business relationships, there's various types of it. Sometimes you need a contract between the parties, and I guess it's a three-party situation. Sometimes you need a contract, sometimes you don't need a contract. I think it's related to, if you think about it, defamation, because it's kind of a limitation on free speech. It would be like tortious interference, defamation, and threats, maybe obscenity, fighting words, terrorist threats. Those are all kind of limitations on the First Amendment, so it's kind of under there. But anyway, this article, they're not mentioning that Mark Waid. You seem to have skipped that whole part about Mark Waid saying he had a call in and the whole tortious interference. Let's Both Antarctic and Waid issued statements denying that any threats or bullying had taken place. Oh, how big of them? Because they know they're going to end up in court. Meyer sued Waid for tortious interference with contract and defamation. In a motion to dismiss, with Mark Zaid asserted his own public attacks against blah, 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 responsible for comments on Twitter calling writer Ta-Nehisi Coates a race hustler. Ta-Nehisi Coates, I believe, I think he did Captain America, and if I remember right, he probably is a race hustler. Accusing a number of female professionals of being hired solely based on gender. That's probably true. And referring to trans and non-binary DC writers as a modern-day carnival. Is that an insult? It's kind of a deep insult. Isn't carnival, carne, from Latin for meat or something? Anyway, you see how this stuff is written. It's just absolutely stupid. It's so biased. I'm not that familiar with Wiki. It's just not something, it's not a site that I'm on all the time. So if this is an example of the kind of thing you see on Wiki, then it's completely useless, because this is obviously written by someone who really has a hard-on for Meyer and what's the guy's name? Ethan Van Sciver. They really don't like these guys, and they really don't like ComicsGate, and they're probably very far left of center. So to have this kind of stuff as Wiki is not a source of anything. If this is, I mean, some of these things are very, very old. They should have been corrected, and the fact that they're not just means that Wiki's garbage. Many comic professionals chose to ignore ComicsGate to avoid giving it publicity. Okay, that's the funny thing about the Bleeding Cool situation. When Meyer had his book campaign on Indiegogo, Jawbreakers, nobody touched it. He got zero publicity from Bleeding Cool and the other comic book resources and whatever, all those other, there's like a dozen top comic book sites and social or media sites that deal with comic books and kind of superhero type stuff. Nobody gave him any publicity. He managed to raise almost $200,000 on his own, and then Antarctic Press and Mark Waid, who I believe tortiously interfered with the contract between Antarctic Press and Meyer, that went public. Because it went public, Meyer got another $200,000 in funding on Indiegogo, and he decided to leave his campaign up. So it's kind of a weird situation where there's an argument to be made. There's an area of law called remedies that is related to torts. It's like what happens after the tort has been proved, where you cause someone a harm, but the harm results in a financial benefit to them, which is kind of, this is too early in the Meyer v. Waid to even talk about this weird area of law. But Wade's attorney, if Wade's attorney sees that he's losing and he wants to try to offset the damages, he might try to make an issue about, because of Wade's tortious interference and defamation, he actually probably made Meyer more money than Meyer would have made with the publicity. But the court probably has a goal of not rewarding bad behavior, and Wade's behavior was very, very bad because, like I said, he got the $200,000, and because of Waid, he made another $200,000. Okay. Criticism for public comments. Okay, yeah, but what are you going to cover? Should I look up Mark Waid on a wiki? I think you guys would probably take your knee pads out and just pretty much blow him. Van Sciver's faced backlash, joking about suicides by Democrats, comment on Reddit about a queer globalist mess. That's a pretty good sentence. Queer globalist mess. Don't they call it global homo? Because there's some kind of thing where the people on the left are trying to turn the kids gay, and you think, oh, what hyperbole, what a slippery slope that is. Look at Desmond is amazing. Look at the trans kid phenomenon. If you think they're not trying to, if they're turning the frogs gay. Well, I don't know about the frog. Well, they're turning the kids gay, definitely. Hosting alt-right leader, again, facts not on evidence, Vox Day, an episode on his YouTube channel. Yeah, I think he had him on to talk about something. I don't think Vox Day is an alt-right leader. I don't think he's a leader of anything. He's a writer, an editor, or some kind of publisher, something like that. Okay, they talk about the widow claim by ComicsGate her husband to support the campaign. That's kind of, I don't know if all this happened. She was the subject of online attacks on Twitter. Several industry veterans, Sikinowicz, the others, Magdalene Visaggio. Why don't you have her, Magdalene Visaggio, in hypertext? LGBT bigots. They wrote rebukes to the movement, a social media post, some nobody, teachers writing in college, DC talent development. Oh, geez. Movement launched cruel personal attacks on his students that were and still are especially repugnant for the racist, sexist, homo. Again, facts, not evidence. This is just nonsense. This is just... All right, this is just very, very frustrating. My eyes are just rolling back as far as I can go. Writer Tom Taylor posted a message rejecting ComicsGate. Oh, how stunning and brave, Tom Taylor. How courageous. I believe comics are for everyone. There is no excuse for harassment. That's how these people pronounce it. No place for homophobia, transphobia, racism, misogyny, or misandry, right? What, you going to include misandry? Or... No, I guess she probably won't include Miss Andrea. In comics criticism, no place for homophobia. Transphobia? Well, people use the term bundle of sticks. Admittedly, I try not to use that term anymore because it's just something I am moving away from. But I understand when the people use that term, bundle of sticks, they're joking. They're not actually making fun of homosexuals. They're just using the term to mean something silly or frivolous. Transphobia? I don't think there's any transphobia. Racism? No. Of course, racism doesn't belong in comics criticism. Racism doesn't belong in anything. But racism goes against everyone. Or misogyny or misandry. Of course, you shouldn't make fun of someone because of their sex or their gender, but that's not what people are doing. People like Yellow Flash and Tug and Diversity in Comics and the rest, these people who review comics, they're not any of these things. They're just decent, average people. They're not these socialists of the 1930s. Okay, all these creators, some I've never heard of, who are far left creators, and no, none of them are Christian. They are either atheist, Jewish, or Muslim. That is correct. As you can tell by some of these names, they took a stunning and brave position. Of course. Paste magazine took issue with the phrasing of Taylor's statement, arguing the group's activity should not be equated with critical commentary. Comic Book Resources compared the movement to harassment that drove actress Kelly Marie Tran. But have you proved that Kelly Marie Tran was driven off of social media? Someone said there's a claim out there that she was driven off social media because of her performance in The Last Jedi. She's an actress who played some role in The Last Jedi. Last Jedi was not a good movie. It was a grade C movie. Did she do badly in it? No, she just performed the roles that she did what other people told her to do. She wasn't great, but she wasn't the worst part of the movie. The movie itself was so horrible that Kelly Marie Tran couldn't hurt the movie anymore. The whole movie was dumb. Bombs falling out of spaceships. They use gravity to fall. And ships that have force fields that prevent oxygen from leaking out, they maintain equilibrium, or they maintain the pressure of the ship. But then sometimes those force fields are in place and sometimes they're not in place, but the equilibrium of the ship is maintained. I understand physics is not a real big issue for Star Wars, but The Last Jedi was such a cluster F. Anyway, Kelly Marie Tran wasn't necessarily driven off of social media because she didn't release a statement that said that. She was probably just getting ready for a film. She didn't want to deal with social media. So you made an unsubstantiated claim. Jack Kirby Stan Lee had also faced fan backlash for including political themes in comic books. Oh, you mean like Slap a Jap? Remember? Slap a Jap? Yes, you should punch Nazis and you should slap Japs and you should kill commies. Because that was comic books back in the day. Somehow they always leave out that slap a Jap part. Guess what? That's not racist. They were the enemy. They were monsters. In World War II, if you know, I've read quite a bit about World War II and the Japanese role in the War of the Pacific theater. Japanese were monsters. There was nobody worse than the Japanese, and they were 10 times worse than the Germans. Read The Rape of Nanking, and that is your starting book. Talk to the Koreans, talk to the Chinese, talk to the English, Australian, Canadian, American prisoners of war who were prisoners in the Pacific. Talk to the Southeast Asians, the Burmas, whoever had any interaction whatsoever with the Japanese. There was no one worse in recent history than the Japanese. So saying slap a Jap is not racist. They were the enemy. They bombed Pearl Harbor. Talk to anyone who lived in Oahu on December 7th, the day that will live in infamy. Anyway, these references, I'm sure they are all from far, far left biased sources. Odd that you don't put the sources. You just put hypertext, but you don't actually put the names. Yeah, this is stupid. Maybe I will take oh God. Are there any positive sources? Mark Waid motions in Myers v. Mark Waid. That isn't, I didn't actually follow that much of the case. I could look into it. I was thinking about covering the issue of tortious interference with advantageous business relationships, but it is really a heavy area of law. And though now in the age of social media, it seems like it's an area of law that is coming up more and more. And it has some interesting issues about jurisdiction and federal courts. So maybe, I don't know. It's I don't know. I don't think anyone would watch it. This video's gone on long enough, so I won't click on Mark Waid. But I might click on it for another. I'll take a look at this at another time because he is a piece of work. Early life career, legal issues. Do I dare? No, this is it? One paragraph? One wall of 10 lines? One wall of text? Are you freaking kidding me? Definitely. This is probably the exact same thing you wrote. It's just copy pasted. Are you gonna? It doesn't bring up the issue of Waid's Facebook post where he said, "I have a call into Antarctic Press." You friggin' cowards! You absolute cowards! Oh, what a bunch of. Okay, so apparently Wikipedia is garbage now. Didn't it start in the 90s? I kind of vaguely remember it started 20 years ago, and it was at least 20 years ago it had a better reputation, but it's just garbage. This is just absolute lies and defamatory crap. Anyway, this is a very long video. I am going to look at the Vox Day thing, even though I realize what a hot topic he is, because it's so friggin' funny. I'll make it much, much shorter. Anyways, like and subscribe and leave a comment if you're interested.